LegCo passes a bill scrapping the MPF offsetting mechanism in 2025. Carrie Lam says she's delivered a report card that she's not ashamed of. And 674 new COVID-19 infections in the city.
Good evening and welcome. Hong Kong took a key step forward today in plugging a decade-long loophole in labor laws. The Legislative Council passed a bill to scrap the offsetting mechanism under the Mandatory Provident Fund.
But as Jackie Lin reports, the government still needs to iron out administrative issues before the bill takes effect in 2025.
With 72 votes in favor, 5 against and 12 abstentions, comes a conclusion to the years-long debate to scrap the Mandatory Provident Fund offsetting mechanism. The controversial system has allowed employers to dip into workers' pensions to cover their severance and long service payments. A business sector lawmaker sang to decry unfairness, saying the move is bound to cause an extra burden, especially for small and medium-sized enterprises. And despite reaching a milestone today, more work needs to be done to smoothen the transitional period. Around $33 billion will be set aside to subsidize employers over a 25-year period after the offsetting mechanism is removed. Still, questions remain, especially on the 3-year wait before the bill takes effect, due to the need to overhaul the EMPF platform.
We do not think the government is reasonable to link up with the abolition system with the EMPA system. We cannot see the correlations.
The Labour chief came to his defense.
The alternative of not making full use of the EMPF platform will imply that the government has to set up a separate platform, including designated saving account, and how to assist the employers to deal with all this calculation of offsettable and non-offsettable severance payment or long service payment. And to do that, it will almost again take 2 to 3 years' time.
While the bill's passing is welcome news to most workers, it's another story for business operators. This owner of a skincare product company says he will lay off some regular staff before the mechanism takes effect and hire new ones on a contractual basis so as to work around the pension system. Jackie Lam, TVB News.
Carrie Lam spoke at the Legislative Council Q&A session for the last time as chief executive today. She said her term of office coincided with the most challenging times in Hong Kong since the 1997 handover, but she never considered quitting.
Lawmakers thanked the outgoing CE for her work while raising concerns over the housing shortage problem and cross-border travels. Sharon Tang has more.
In her last LegCo Q&A session as chief executive before leaving office, Carrie Lam concluded her term of office this way.
The past 5 years were full of turbulence, but I remained undaunted. It is because I have a sense of mission. It is actually a historic mission. Although the public may have different views of me, I have delivered a report card that I am not ashamed of.
She recalled there was a lack of trust between government officials and lawmakers in the past, followed by filibustering, saying these events made her sad. She said the violence during the anti-extradition movement showed that a good relationship between the administration and LegCo must be based on having patriots ruling Hong Kong.
There has never been any moment of my regretting having taken up this appointment. I took the oath when I assumed office, and I said that I would always walk with Hong Kong people.
Lam said she's delivered a report card with a clear conscience, marking a good ending to her 42 years of public service as lawmakers thanked her contributions.
As the first female chief executive in the Hong Kong SAR, you set a good example for all women. You're facing a lot of pressure, undoubtedly, and I have deep respect for you.
Then a standing ovation. Meanwhile, some lawmakers called for the speeding up of the construction of transitional housing units.
For the next term of government, I would advise them to work even harder. And my appeal to land developers is for them to continue to support this meaningful initiative.
Others were concerned how businesses have suffered without quarantine-free travel to the mainland. Lam said careful assessment is needed and it's very hard to come up with a proposal that could satisfy both parties. On a more positive note, Carrie Lam said the opening ceremony of the Hong Kong Palace Museum will be held on the 22nd this month, adding she's happy to help with any related works after she steps down. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
Hong Kong reported 674 new COVID-19 infections today. That's 116 more than yesterday. There are also 73 imported cases.
A woman working at a quarantine hotel is suspected to be infected with the BA4 or BA5 variant. Timothy Lee has more.
The city reported one more case of suspected BA4 or BA5 mutant strain. The infected woman, a 46-year-old part-time worker at Regalis Sky City Hotel, tested positive for COVID on Monday. Her main work duties include managing room keys and handling baggage on the 3rd to 7th floors of the hotel. She lives in Tak Yat House in Tongcheng's Yat Tong 2 estate and dined at King's Prawn Nanfang Seafood Restaurant last Saturday. Authorities believe the woman was infected in the quarantine hotel.
We cannot predict the risk arising from the spread of BA.4 or BA.5, but from overseas experience, and they are more transmissible, although we haven't seen any high cases of death or serious cases.
The city also reported 8 new cases of the BA2 121 mutant strain. Among them, 3 infections were found in Ho Man Tin's Kwun Tak Court. 2 cases were found in Chan Kwon O's Pak Shin Kok married quarters, and another 3 were found separately in Fo Tan and Chan Kwon O. Meanwhile, from a total of 81 schools, 68 more students and 22 staff members have tested positive. A teacher at the Polenkok Lam Man Chan English Primary School tested positive yesterday, along with 3 of his pupils. The affected class will be suspended for 1 week. In Central, bar clusters continue to expand. The cluster at the Link Bar saw 4 more cases, bringing its total caseload to 99 infections. The Shuffle Bar reported 13 more cases, reaching a total of 110 infections, with some of its patrons having also visited the Iron Fairies Bar. A public hospital announced an 89-year-old patient who was found unconscious at home last Friday died from COVID. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Meantime, the United States has approved a possible $120 million sale of parts to help Taiwan maintain its warships. Taiwan said the deal would help ensure combat readiness in the face of frequent activities near the island by mainland forces. The U.S. Defense Security Cooperation Agency said it had delivered the required certification notifying Congress following State Department approval for the sale. The sale covers unclassified spare and repair parts for ships. They will be sourced from approved U.S. Navy vendors or from the current U.S. Navy stock. Most of Taiwan's main warships are U.S. made or designed. China's Navy has been conducting increasingly regular missions near Taiwan. The island has also complained of repeated missions in its air defense identification zone by warplanes from the mainland side.
U.S. President Joe Biden opened the Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles on Wednesday.
The gathering aims to boost cooperation between Washington and other nations in North, Central, and South America on various economic and political issues. Daniel Rao tells us more.
High on U.S. President Joe Biden's agenda at the opening of the Summit of the Americas was a pledge to strengthen economic ties.
And tonight, I'm announcing a new economic partnership that builds on all the work we have done with the region and will guide our engagement going forward. We're calling it America's Partnership for Economic Prosperity. Together, we have to invest in making sure our trade is sustainable and responsible in creating supply chains that are more resilient, more secure, and more sustainable. By working with close friends who share our values, we can make sure that we are not left vulnerable to unexpected shocks while generating economic opportunity for the people in our region.
Negotiations on the partnership are expected to begin this autumn. Biden's initial draft of the deal reportedly does not include tariff relief and is set to focus largely on boosting commerce between the U.S. and American nations, which already have trade accords with the White House. The U.S. president also discussed migration. He said safe and orderly migration is good for all of the economies in the Americas, including the United States, adding all unlawful migration is not acceptable. He stated the U.S. will enforce its borders, including through innovative and coordinated action with regional partners. Biden is expected to unveil a string of further programs in the coming days. Among them are believed to be a Caribbean climate partnership and a Pan-American health worker training initiative. Biden will discuss environmental matters with his Latin American counterparts today as he gears up for his first formal encounter with Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, a staunch climate change skeptic. The leaders will also hold talks on energy security as the West strives to cut its dependence on Russian oil and gas amid Moscow's ongoing invasion of Ukraine. However, doubts are being cast over whether the summit will prove a success. That's because the U.S. declined to invite the leaders of geopolitical rivals Cuba, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. This prompted the likes of Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador to boycott the talks. Defending his absence, Obrador said there cannot be a summit of the Americas if all countries of the Americas cannot attend. Daniel Rowell, TVB News.
The U.S. House of Representatives has passed a wide-ranging gun control bill amid a seemingly never-ending cycle of mass shootings in the country. The legislation, which passed by a mostly party-line vote of 223 to 204, would raise the minimum age limit to 21 for purchasing a semi-automatic rifle. It would also ban the sale of ammunition magazines with a capacity of more than 15 rounds. The push comes after a House committee heard wrenching testimony from recent shooting victims and family members. The legislation has almost no chance of making it through the Senate, but as public rage grows over gun violence, the issue could give Democrats leverage ahead of the November midterm elections.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson faced Parliament for the first time since narrowly surviving a no-confidence vote brought by his own Conservative Party. A total of 41% of Tory MPs voted against him in Monday's ballot. Still, Johnson told the House of Commons that he plans to plow ahead and tackle issues such as crime, soaring cost of living, and a growing National Health Service patient backlog. He also vowed to create more high-skilled jobs while hitting back at criticism from the opposition Labour Party.
I, of course, picked up political opponents all over the place. And that is because this government has done some very big and very remarkable things which they did not necessarily approve of. And what I want her to know is that absolutely nothing and no one, least of all her, is going to stop us with getting on for delivering for the British people. And as for jobs, I'm going to get on with mine, and I hope he gets on with his.
Still ahead on tonight's news, Ukrainian troops vow to fight in a key eastern city for as long as possible while work is underway to try to allow Ukraine to export wheat. A deadly fire in the South Korean city of Daegu.
Welcome back to TVB News. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry said today its troops have won back some territory from Russian forces in a counteroffensive in the Kherson area of southern Ukraine.
Meanwhile, the battle for control of a major eastern city, now the main focus of Russia's offensive in Ukraine, is said to be key to the future of eastern Ukraine.
Сєвєродонецьк за підсумками і цієї доби вже
The fight for Severodonetsk is brutal and will determine the fate of the Donbass region. That today from Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky as Russian troops continue a ferocious assault aimed at controlling eastern Ukraine. Despite being vastly outnumbered, Ukrainian forces still hold the industrial zone and adjacent areas in the city. Ukrainian commanders claim Russian forces have suffered losses in manpower and equipment as they were pushed back. Video is hard to come by, but a regional official says artillery shelling has turned the city into a bombed-out wasteland. Officials say it is now impossible to evacuate people, with about 10,000 civilians remaining in the city. Zelensky also warned that millions could starve because of Russia's blockade of Ukraine's Black Sea ports. The head of the United Nations, meanwhile, continues to work on a package allowing Ukraine to export wheat and other commodities from Odessa and enabling Russia to export grain and fertilizer to global markets.
Vulnerable people and vulnerable countries are already being hit hard, but make no mistake, no country or community will be left untouched by this cost of living crisis.
Ukraine says it is working with the UN on a plan to guarantee safe corridors with the help of Western countries that Ukraine can trust. During talks in Ankara yesterday, the top foreign diplomats of Russia and Turkey voiced support for a safe export corridor. But Russia is also demanding Ukraine remove mines from the Black Sea, adding the West should ease sanctions on Moscow. The European Union accuses Moscow of weaponizing food supplies to gain an advantage in the war. Towards the end of a joint press conference, a Ukrainian journalist asked Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, apart from grain, what stolen goods had Russia managed to sell. Lavrov replied that Russia is busy achieving its goal to free eastern Ukraine from the pressure of the Nazi regime. In South Korea, a fire broke out at a lawyer's office in the city of Daegu today. At least 7 people died, including a suspected arsonist. The high death toll came as the 7-story building did not have sprinklers on the office floors, according to the fire department. About 40 others were hurt, mostly from smoke inhalation. Authorities deployed 160 firefighters and 50 fire engines to the scene. They put out the blaze in 20 minutes. The deadly fire is still under investigation. Daegu was the site of one of the worst arson attacks in South Korea's history. In 2003, nearly 200 people died after a man set fire on a subway train.
Back here in Hong Kong in 2020, a 55-year-old woman was robbed in Cheung Sha Wan by 2 men when her gold necklace was snatched. She later died from a brain injury from the robbery and pneumonia, which was a complication from that injury. The 2 men were sentenced to 10 years in prison today after pleading guilty to accidentally killing their robbery target. Chan Li Ming, aged 58, and Lo Kin Kung, aged 59, admitted to the involuntary manslaughter of Lin Lai Fan outside the Cheung Sha Wan wholesale vegetable market in 2020. High Court Judge Joseph Yao called the 2 men cowards and sentenced them to 10 years in jail each.
This morning, rescuers recovered the body of a woman who went missing while hiking in Tai Po yesterday. Authorities suspect she was swept away by a powerful rush of water while the red rainstorm warning was in force. Police vehicles and an ambulance arrived at the Plover Cove Reservoir after the body of the woman was found at around 9 a.m. in the nearby Bride's Pool area. The victim, who is about 50 years old, was suspected to have fallen into a stream while hiking in the rain. The Fire Services Department's diving unit took part in the rescue operation, so did the government flying service.
So, James, you've got some big news in the world of gymnastics tonight.
Major scandal and the latest development in it. More than 90 women, including U.S. Olympic gymnastics gold medalist Simone Biles, are planning to file lawsuits against the FBI. They're accusing former FBI agents of mishandling the sex abuse investigation into former U.S. gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar. Their total claims reportedly amount to more than $1 billion U.S. dollars. The women say the FBI failed to act quickly enough to stop Nassar. when they first received allegations against him. In 2018, Nasser was sentenced to up to 175 years behind bars for abusing young female gymnasts. Under U.S. federal law, government agencies have 6 months to respond to tort claims, such as those filed by the women. Just 2 weeks ago, the U.S. Justice Department announced it will stick to its previous decision not to file criminal charges against former FBI agents accused of botching the Nasser investigation.
That's the news. Thanks for watching.
Good night.